What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Danielle Hallen and I am back with another true crime case. And today, this case is possibly one of the most cruel cases that I have looked into in a long time. The level of premeditation and stalking and collaborative efforts and more that is involved in this is honestly mind-blowing. It's terrifying to see what jealousy can do to people. And this is an extreme prime example of just that, because the jealousy of one woman, an ex-girlfriend, ended up landing 3 people in prison for murder, one of which is on death row, another of which ended up on the FBI's top 10 most wanted list, and ultimately we lost the life of an outstanding, beautiful, professional 35-year-old woman named Kendra Hatcher. Before we can get into the details of the case, I first want to say a massive thank you to Helix for partnering with me on today's video. Working with brands like Helix allows me to contribute back to these families and victims as much as I possibly can, and allows me to create these videos for you guys. So the average person spends roughly 25 years sleeping throughout their entire life. That's an incredibly long time, and so it definitely does not hurt to have an amazing mattress. Helix makes premium mattresses and bedding that are customized to fit your needs and is shipped straight to your door with free shipping all across the United States, and that's definitely something that makes it a lot easier for me, a working mom of 2. Now, the mattress comes rolled up in a box and it can be easily set up in just minutes. You can definitely do it by yourself, and this is all to ensure that you have the best sleep possible every single night. Now, everyone sleeps differently, and Helix recognizes that, so they've created this awesome sleep quiz that takes your body type and your sleep preferences all into account and recommends the perfect mattress for you. Now, I'm personally like a side/back sleeper, and I prefer a medium mattress, so after taking the quiz, I was recommended the Helix Midnight Luxe, and you guys, this mattress is so luxurious. It's pillowy soft. It hugs your body perfectly so you can stay comfortable throughout the night. I know that the quality of sleep in my life has improved. And on top of that, my gigantic Great Dane also has no complaints. Helix mattresses are fiberglass free. You guys know I'm an absolute health nut, and there's lots of lawsuits in regards to the use of fiberglass as a flame retardant mattresses, so I was absolutely thrilled to find a mattress without it. And Helix also has your back in more ways than one. Helix offers a 100-night sleep trial, so you can make sure you have the best mattress to fit your needs, and there's a 10-year warranty. Purchasing a mattress is definitely a big investment. They have finance options and flexible payment plans, since everyone deserves a good night's sleep. I absolutely love my Helix mattress, and I think that you guys would too. So if you're looking for a new bed, we do have cozy season very quickly approaching. Go check out Helix Sleep. You can click the link down below, or you can go to helixsleep.com/Danielle Hallen to get 20% off your Helix mattress plus 2 free pillows. Thank you again to Helix for supporting my channel, and now on to the details of today's case. Now, this all really starts with 38-year-old Ricardo Paniagua, who goes by the name of Ricky, and Ricky is an incredibly successful doctor. He had grown up living in a very modest and humble family in Northern California, and had always known he was capable of doing amazing things, and he did just that. Ricky graduated from Stanford Medical School, he got married, and was ready to start a life, but his studies ultimately led him to move to Dallas, Texas, and unfortunately, this led to a divorce with his wife. So in 2011, Ricky made the move to Dallas, and despite the ongoing divorce, he was very optimistic about his future. Ricky was completing his residency at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center, and he was specializing in dermatology, something he was very passionate about, with plans of eventually moving back to California when he finished. And Ricky was really excelling in Dallas. He was doted on by his colleagues, his professors, and his friends. He was very well known for his bedside manner, and still is, and outside of that, he was just a great guy, incredibly thoughtful, inquisitive, and polite. So it really was no surprise that he was considered quite the catch by a lot of women. He lived in a nice apartment, he had a good head on his shoulders, and endless opportunities for the future. And that's very likely what seemed to draw in 31-year-old Brenda Delgado. Brenda and Ricky met on a dating app in August of 2012, and their relationship progressed pretty quickly because they had a lot in common. Brenda was kind and quiet, she was easy to talk to, and had also come from a difficult background that, like Ricky, pushed her to be determined to achieve the absolute most she could. Brenda's family had come to Texas from Mexico for a better life, and once they moved to the United States, her father got a job in construction, and her mother worked multiple jobs to help fill in the gaps, including a cleaning business that Brenda kind of helped her get off the ground later on in life. And so they had quite a few struggles behind them. Brenda, however, was absolutely thrilled about all of the possibilities now that she was in Texas. And according to her family, she was so determined to make something of herself. Despite all of the financial roadblocks to go through medical school, she pushed to get a job as a dental assistant. And once she was kind of somewhat steady on her feet, she moved out of her parents' home, which was a big goal of hers. But she wasn't quite making enough for her own place. So she moved in with a friend and her friend's husband. And Brenda had the goal at this point to save up enough to put herself through medical school to become an actual dentist. Now, both Ricky and Brenda, as I stated, had come from families that had struggled, and they both had overcome a lot to get where they were currently. And so this mutual respect between them seemed to help propel their relationship. And they seemed very happy. Their relationship was moving along, and in November of 2012, within just 3 months of dating, Brenda ended up in a position where she needed a little bit of help. Now, the couple that she had been staying with had ended up asking her to move out because they wanted their space back. I mean, they are a newly married couple, and Brenda was not in a position yet to pay her own way. So she ultimately went to Ricky and said, "Hey, would it be okay if I moved in with you?" And I quickly want to state this, and it's just my own personal opinion from hearing about Ricky, the kind of person he is, watching him on the witness stand, just everything that I was able to personally gather. He seems like the kind of person who will pretty much do anything for anyone. He does not like to see people around him struggling or in a hard spot, and he will be helpful if he has the means to be. And it almost seems like he is so willing to only see the good in people that he ends up totally blind to when he's being manipulated or when someone doesn't necessarily have the best intentions. He just kind of seems to like push past all of that and live life with rose-colored glasses. And so, despite the fact that they were kind of early on in their relationship and this was a big move, he saw someone in need and opened up his home to Brenda. And this, honestly, again, was great. Brenda was unable to pay rent, so she helped out in other ways. For example, her mom would regularly clean their apartment. Ricky also helped her out with other bills, including adding her to his phone plan. And this kind of allowed her to make more moves in her personal life. She wanted to be able to contribute more. She wanted to progress in her career. So she enrolled in dental hygiene school at Sanford Brown and also got a part-time job at the local mall on the weekends to be able to pitch in extra money around the home. And their relationship was getting to the point that they were talking about some pretty serious things like marriage. Brenda at this point had already taken Ricky to Mexico to meet some of her family, and Ricky had actually bought her a promise ring. I mean, they had high hopes for the future. It seemed, by all accounts, that this path was leading straight to marriage. But there ended up being a bit of a road bump that tested their relationship in June of 2013. Brenda fell pregnant. And at this time, both Ricky and Brenda were still working on their careers. As I'm sure you can tell at this point, they are very focused on their goals in life. And so they made the decision that it was just not a good time for them to bring a child into the world. And so they decided to terminate the pregnancy. And I'm unsure if it was this or other things going on. It's never really been clear, but within almost a year exactly, in July of 2014, after around 2+ years of dating, Ricky made the decision to part ways with Brenda. I've never seen any reasons why he decided this. I guess he just decided it was best for him, and so he asked her to move out. This news seemed to hit both of them in polar opposite ways. Brenda, who was still in dental hygiene school at the time, was so distraught that she decided to take some time off of school. She genuinely felt like she could not focus on her studies. She was under the impression that they were going to get married, that they had been working on their relationship this entire time to spend their whole lives together. And so she took some time off. And when she'd actually first started school, her classmates said that her response to introducing herself was just her speaking about Ricky. Anyone that knew Brenda knew Ricky almost as well as she did. And so she was devastated when the relationship ended. Now, obviously, this put her out of a place to stay, so she ended up getting a small one-bedroom apartment, and she did not move very far away from Ricky at all. I believe it was about like a mile or two down the road from Ricky's, but Ricky, being who he was, he continued to take care of some of her bills, help her out, because again, he didn't want to see anyone in a bad spot, and it seems like he kind of felt bad about having to end the relationship. Obviously, when you spend that long with someone, you probably are going to. So he helped her out in any way he could. But on the other hand, Ricky was also ready to go. He was back on dating sites. He went on a handful of dates, continued his residency, and in September of 2014, so just 2 months after the breakup, he even decided he was going to start taking salsa dancing classes. Like, he's just booking it. He doesn't hesitate, it seems, through anything. So that kind of tells me that he knew their relationship was just not what he wanted, or maybe there were some issues going on and he was just ready to move forward with something different. And then one day, Ricky walks into a salsa dancing class, and lo and behold, there is Brenda Delgado. Brenda was in the class across the room, and Ricky's thinking this is the craziest coincidence. He hadn't told anyone about these classes. He definitely had not told Brenda about these classes. And the way that the class is set up, you switch dance partners every few minutes. And so he kind of knew there was bound to be a time that he was going to be dancing with Brenda. And sure enough, that happened. And slowly but surely, through these few minutes together throughout these classes, they ended up reconnecting and ultimately made the decision to give their relationship another try. And this time, they kind of decided they were going to slow down and take it a little easy. Brenda did not move back in with Ricky. Instead, she stayed at her apartment down the road. Ricky did continue to help with expenses, but it seems that fairly quickly, Ricky realized this just isn't right. Like, I think he wanted to give it a try. They both did, but he's like, I'm just still not feeling this. And so, citing personal issues that he wanted to deal with for the second time in February of 2015, Ricky ended the relationship with Brenda. And this went about the same way as it did the first time. Brenda was devastated and Ricky was just moving right on with his life. But over the next few months, Brenda just kept on popping up all over the place. Ricky was always out and about around town, and since Brenda did live relatively close by, it wasn't too crazy to see her out, but he was seeing her very, very frequently. So Ricky, since he moved, had pretty much been running on the Katy Trail near his home on a regular basis. And he started to realize that at least once a week, he would bump into Brenda on this busy trail. He also started to bump into her when he was out around town, and specifically, he ran into her after a date at Panera Bread one time. But this entire time, Ricky was just chalking it up to them living close in proximity, that Brenda was just coincidentally showing up at all of these places that he frequented. But this entire time, Ricky was just chalking it up to them living in close proximity, that Brenda was just coincidentally showing up in all of the places that he frequented, just like she had coincidentally popped up at his salsa dancing classes when they decided to get back together. But the truth was far more sinister than that. And by May of 2015, oblivious to the growing green monster of jealousy that Brenda was just harboring, Ricky met 35-year-old Kendra Hatcher. Kendra was an amazing, amazing woman. She was born and raised in Pleasant Plains, Illinois, and she had been incredibly popular growing up. She was always the sweet, kind friend that you could rely on. Kendra was outgoing, she was driven, she had been the captain of both the cheerleading squad and the volleyball team at her high school, and she dedicated majority of her time off of school helping out others. Instead of going with friends to the beach for spring break, Kendra was volunteering at Habitat for Humanity. And instead of lounging around during her summers, she traveled with her church to help communities in need. Kendra was just a very loving and selfless person. And when it came to her future, there was so much that she wanted to do. Sky was the absolute limit with Kendra. She initially went to school to major in Spanish and, just casually minored in biochem. But she had dreams bigger than that. And so once she completed that, she applied to and was accepted to the University of Kentucky to become a dentist. Kendra, this was like the perfect job for her. She just had this way with people. She was warm, she was inviting, she was calming, she worked exceptionally well with children, and even with her studies and being so successful, she also continued to make time for others. She ended up traveling at one point to Ecuador to provide dental work to those that did not have access to it. According to her friends, quote, "You could call her at 3 a.m. and she would answer without any hesitation." Now, once she was out of college, she married her college sweetheart, but that relationship didn't work out, and she decided she needed to start over. She wanted to go somewhere different, start a new life. So Kendra made a big decision to move to Dallas, Texas. And while most people would kind of drown in a new big city, Kendra took this head on, you guys. She moved into a beautiful high-rise in Gables Park near downtown Dallas. She took a position as a pediatric dentist, and she just hit the ground running. She had an incredibly busy social life. She was making friends wherever she went. She loved to attend yoga classes. She was always trying out new restaurants in the area. And after she kind of got her footing in Dallas and felt like she was on the path she wanted to be on, she decided that she wanted to try for a relationship. And so she made a profile on a dating app, and that is where she met Ricky. Now, I know it's cliche to say that there were fireworks, but quite honestly, that is the only way to describe Kendra and Ricky's relationship. They were infatuated with each other and tumbled into this beautiful relationship that, honestly, looking through pictures and what everyone has to say, feels like something out of a Nicholas Sparks movie. According to Ricky, quote, "Our values were matched. Our interests were really in sync from the get-go." They both had matching massive goals in life, things that they wanted to accomplish, the same moral compass. They matched each other's energy, and it was one hell of a summer that they spent together. Kendra and Ricky went on endless dates, took many trips together. There are just endless photos on both of their social media profiles of them trying out new restaurants and having all of this fun together. They took numerous trips. You could see their relationship unfolding all over social media. They spoke about their future adventures, and it was just beyond obvious how happy they were together. Now, during this time, Ricky still had some brief communication with Brenda. They didn't speak frequently. It was nothing like that. I feel like the trial and what Ricky has to say portrays a different story than a handful of the different articles and other bits of coverage. Some make it seem like they had like a close relationship still, like a friendship. But according to what is said at the trial, this is not the case. It mainly had to do with the fact that Ricky, at one point during his relationship with Kendra, started having issues with his car. And so he made the decision to reach out to Brenda because she had so many contacts in the area of Dallas, because this is where she had lived at this point for many, many years. And Brenda was more than happy to help Ricky. She set him up an appointment with a friend of hers at a shop, and she even picked him up after he dropped his car off there and took him home. And so it seemed amicable. There didn't seem to be any hard feelings, any bad blood. And so it was just an average situation. But that, from my understanding, is like the extent of their communication for the most part. And by August of 2015, things between Ricky and Kendra got pretty serious. They had been dating for a few months at this point. And Ricky decided to take Kendra to meet his family. Ricky was finishing up his residency at the time, and he had plans to move back to California that October. And so he fully intended for Kendra to come with him, and she mirrored his desires as well. And so at this point, Ricky sent Brenda an email basically saying, "Hey, look, I am in a very successful and healthy new relationship. I see this going pretty far." And it seems like he was essentially trying to say, hey, don't hold on to us getting back together like last time. I have fully moved on. And I don't know if she ever responded to this email, but he ended up reaching out to her again a little while later to wish her good luck on her finals. Brenda was supposed to graduate on August 26th of that year, but also to tell her, hey, you're going to be removed off my phone plan on August 31st, because this whole entire time that he had been dating Kendra, he was still paying for certain things for Brenda. And the way that he describes it in the trial, it's not even necessarily that he wanted to. He states that he had repeatedly tried to get her own phone plan and get off of his multiple times, and it wasn't happening. And because he was pretty solid in his future plans that he was moving in October, Kendra was coming with him, he was personally getting her phone off his plan by the end of the month. And again, I don't know if she had anything to say about this. At this point, Ricky and Kendra had plans to go and see Kendra's parents in September, another part of kind of moving their relationship forward, and they started to even speak about a wedding fund, making plans for the two of them to head to Sacramento and eventually get married. I think they even posted about this on social media, and they were looking up regulations of how they were going to get Kendra's license active in California and all the different things I'd have to do. I mean, it was a lot of planning. And so to celebrate, they decided to take a trip, just the two of them, on September 3rd, kind of like a last fun little trip before they started their new life together. But this whirlwind of happy love turned into an absolutely heartbreaking disaster. September the 2nd, both Ricky and Brenda spent the day working. They were supposed to leave the following day for their trip. They were so excited about it. And at around 4:15 p.m. that day, Ricky got off work, gathered a few items from his home, and then headed to Kendra's apartment to hang out until she got off work. They had plans to kind of pack and finalize things at Kendra's apartment, stay there that night, and then the next morning head off to the airport. So at around 6 p.m., Ricky headed off to take his typical run on the Katy Trail. He left his phone behind at Kendra's apartment. Ricky returned back to Kendra's apartment around 7:30 p.m. and saw that at 6:45 p.m., so about 45 minutes prior, he had received a text from Kendra stating that she was off work finally and heading home. Now, I believe like 20 or so minutes after this, she sent him another text saying that she was taking a detour to her friend Rosie's house to grab an underwater camera for their trip. And at 7:35 p.m., so right after he had, kind of first started seeing all these text messages, she sent another text to him saying that she was on her way home with no more stops planned. So Ricky hung out for a while after these text messages because Kendra should have been getting home relatively soon, but by 8 p.m. there was still no sign of her. And at this point, he just took a big run. He's starving. And so Ricky texted Kendra asking about dinner. And when there was no response, he finally said, okay, I'm going to go out and grab some food for us. I'm starving. So Ricky headed out of Kendra's apartment to the taco truck that was across the street. And the entire time he's there ordering and I believe eating, he was texting Kendra, different things. And one of those text messages was him alerting her to a heavy police presence at her apartment complex. There was all this crime scene tape. There were multiple officers there. And he told her, you're going to probably have to find somewhere else to park because something is going on in the parking garage at your apartment. And at the time, he didn't at all feel like any of this was related to Kendra. Like, this thought did not even cross his mind. So by 8:45 p.m., Ricky, still hadn't heard from Kendra. And so, she's a grown woman. He wasn't super concerned at first. Figured maybe she got caught up running another errand, something to get ready for their trip the following day. So he decided to head back to his apartment to grab a few more last minute things and then headed back to Kendra's, fully believing that she would be there at this point. And when Ricky went to Kendra's apartment, he had to be buzzed up to Kendra's floor, but the person in charge of that was like, you're not going to be able to go up there. And it was in this moment that fear sank in that maybe something had happened to Kendra. And within minutes, Dallas Police Department confirmed that Kendra had been shot to death in the parking garage of the apartment. I can't even begin to imagine what it must have felt like, looking back at the events of that entire night, the text messages that he had sent to her, sitting, eating his dinner and, watching literally the response to her murder unfold in front of him, having no clue that it was her and the center of all of it. And he fell apart. Ricky spoke with authorities, telling them that he had no idea who would do this to Kendra. She had no enemies. She was so well loved. It was supposed to be a secured parking garage. Like, you had to enter a code to get in. It seemed so out of left field that it horrified everyone when this hit the news. Like, all of Dallas was like, wait a minute. We don't want to go in parking garages. We don't want to walk by ourselves, thinking that some person in the area was using the dark shadows and privacy of these tight spaces in downtown Dallas to take people out. Because at the time, no one theorized it was anything targeted, because no one had a reason to target Kendra as far as anyone knew. So initially, it was theorized by Dallas authorities that this was just a robbery gone wrong, that she was just a victim of circumstance, because the way that they found the scene of the crime, her purse had been taken from her, and the underwater camera that she was supposed to have picked up, which was confirmed to have been picked up by her friend, was missing. And with the building that she was living in being known for, housing people with a decent amount of money, it was believed that someone essentially just took advantage of a perfect situation. But it only took authorities a few days to announce that this actually wasn't at all what had happened. That their initial theory that this was not a targeted event was just not the case. After Kendra had been murdered, Ricky had reached out to everyone that he possibly could. People that knew Kendra, people that knew him. He wanted to make sure anyone that needed to know the news about Kendra's death heard it from someone close to her. And he basically also was reaching out to anyone that just knew him personally that could support him in a time of need. And in the midst of all of these phone calls and text messages, Ricky had let Brenda know that Kendra had been killed. I think he texted her like late the night that it happened. He had received no response from her that night in regards to the news that he had told her. Now, Ricky's sister also had immediately flown into town to try to be with him, to help him any way she could. And one of those ways that she helped him was by communicating with all these people that he had reached out to, because he just kind of hit a wall, obviously. And so it wasn't until the following morning after Ricky had sent this text to Brenda that she responded. Now, Brenda expressed her condolences. She was so sorry, and she offered to bring Ricky groceries to get him through the next few days. She's like, look, I can help you out in this way. Let me come over. And this seemed like a nice gesture, so he agreed. But by Monday, September 4th, Ricky and his sister began to question things. Now, authorities had been quiet about most of their investigations so far, but on this particular day, a photo began to circulate the media like crazy. The person who had called 911 to report the murder of Kendra had actually heard it happen and saw the getaway car involved. Now, this young man lived in the apartment complex, the same one as Kendra, and had a friend over with him that night. They were going to head out and get haircuts. So he told authorities that around 7 p.m., he headed down the elevator to the parking garage. And the moment the door opened to the elevator, he heard a gunshot and a scream unlike anything he had ever heard before, describing it as more animal-like than human. Now, before he could really process what was happening, obviously your first instinct when you're in a small space like that and you're a gunshot is to run. And so him and his friend ran to their car that was right there, locked themselves in it, and they watched as a older black Jeep Cherokee with sun damage on the hood just came absolutely barreling down the ramp. And he knew that this had to be someone involved just based on the behavior alone, and also because whoever this was didn't seem to have any concept of the layout of this parking garage, because they're going down the down ramp thinking it's going to lead them to an exit, but the reality is that it was actually a dead end. And so the moment this Jeep passed, this witness immediately pulled out of the parking lot to leave and call 911. And shortly after that, that same black Jeep had turned around and was barreling up the ramp trying to get to the actual exit. As this witness is driving to get out of the parking garage, he ended up seeing Kendra lying on the ground beside her car. Her driver's side door was still open and her phone was still in her hand, open as well. Maybe to text Ricky to let him know, she was coming up. And someone totally took her off guard. But something to authorities seemed off, like more than just a robbery that went wrong, despite the fact that that's initially kind of what it presented itself as. Because Kendra was killed as if this was an execution. She had the entry wound at the top back of her head, and the exit wound was at her chin. And they did find the shell casing, I believe, in the passenger side floorboard of her car. Authorities were investigating this further and were able to access the CCTV and get a snapshot of the Jeep that was in the parking garage that day, as well as its driver. And you can clearly see a woman was driving the car. So this photo was released to the media in hopes that it would lead to someone, because this Jeep wasn't registered to anyone that was living in the building. They weren't really sure how this Jeep managed to get in. And by the end of that same day, authorities received a call from a man named Joe Ortiz, stating that he was the one that owned the car in the video, and while he wasn't personally involved, he knew who was. Joe Ortiz told authorities that the day of the murder, he had lent his car to Brenda Delgado and a woman named Crystal Cortez. Now, Joe went on to tell them and would later testify that he grew up with Brenda. And on September 2nd, the day of the murder, she had reached out to him asking if he could check out her friend's BMW, because Joe Ortiz had his own kind of like body shop type of deal. And she's like, look, my friend's BMW is having issues. Would you mind taking a look at it? But she also said that she would need a replacement car, and so she asked to borrow his Jeep that day. And he agreed. This is someone that he had known his whole life for the most part, and he wasn't really concerned about anything. And so he was more than happy to help out a friend. Brenda ended up showing up that morning with a friend named Crystal, as I've already stated, and this was someone that he didn't know. And the two of them headed off, claiming that they would meet him later on to trade back cars. Now, by late that night, Brenda told Joe to meet her at a local Chili's to swap cars. But when she arrived, the car was nowhere to be found. It was literally just Brenda by herself. Brenda ended up explaining to him that Crystal had taken the car somewhere, and that she had been dropped off at the Chili's by a friend. And essentially, she was just trying to get in touch with Crystal to bring the Jeep back, and they'd be able to swap things and everything would be great. But she kept saying she wasn't able to get in contact with Crystal. According to Joe, it seemed like she was trying to call Crystal using her phone. It wasn't working out, so they got a few appetizers and drinks while they were waiting. And at some point, Brenda asked Joe to use his phone, saying that something was wrong with hers. And so the moment she makes his first phone call to Crystal, magically this time the call went through and they made a plan to just meet up at Joe's house to swap the cars. Now, everything seemed fine according to Joe from here. Crystal showed up with the Jeep. She had her young son in the back. They were able to give him back his Jeep, take the BMW, and the women were off. The next day, September 3rd, Brenda and Crystal showed up at a shop again, claiming they had lost a set of keys in the Jeep. Opportunity. He confronted Kendra about his Jeep being seen on the CCTV footage and got a very bizarre response.
When I talked to her, besides, she just told me what she needed to get done on her car. She wanted me to do some work on it. And then I told her, I gave her a comment like, hey, have you heard about the dentist that got shot in Uptown Dallas? She said no. She said, well, how funny, because, I mean, it looks very similar to mine. I'm over here lending you my car. And then a day later, I found out it's in the news. It looks very similar. And then she asked me if I could show her a picture of it. So I pulled out my phone and I showed her the picture of my Jeep. And she's just trying to convince me that that's not my Jeep. That's not it. And then she tells me that all she knows that Crystal Cortez, she got involved. She don't know what she did. That while she was using my Jeep, Crystal Cortez went to go get some drugs with somebody. She didn't tell me who. And probably something went wrong. And if Crystal Cortez was want to get a hold of me, that I should not pick up the phone, that I should not talk to her because she don't know what she got involved with. So I was like, okay, there goes my hopes hooking up with Crystal. So I was like, okay. But I told her, this is very obvious. This cannot be here and that. What am I gonna? I can't drive this truck no more. I mean, it's all over the news. She said, well, I don't know what happens in there. If I were you, I wouldn't talk to them. So in the conversation, I was like, well, I don't know what to do. She just like, well, why do we just don't say anything, don't tell don't tell your family, don't tell anybody. You can get in trouble with the police, and then risking your citizenship. It's best for you to just hide it and probably paint it a different color if you want to help you pay for that paint job. So I just went along with it, and her idea was to just hide it, I guess, in my shop, and I just followed along with it. And at this point, I'm in shock. I don't know what's going on. I find myself like in a confusion zone where I need to put puzzles together and do the right thing before and think about things, but I wasn't like really thinking. I couldn't believe that something this bad was happening to me. I never saw it coming. So I just agreed with her to just drop off my Jeep at my shop, and I told her, okay, I'll just hide it there. That's what I told her, and then she followed me to drop it off at my shop, and then after that, I dropped her off at her house. When I dropped her off at her house, I went home, still shocked, and I needed time. I really needed time to think about this. And it wasn't until the next day that I called police.
Okay. So Detective Barnes, who was on the case at this point, was hearing this, and he's like, okay, this is not good. And so he calls Ricky and says, look, we're worried that your ex-girlfriend, Brenda Delgado, may have something to do with the murder of your girlfriend, Kendra. And Ricky's like, she's supposed to be heading here soon to bring me groceries, and went into a full-blown panic. And so authorities were like, would figure out where she was, and ultimately found that Kendra was at the library studying yet again, and they picked her up for questioning while other authorities went to pick up Crystal. And so this kind of all happened incredibly quick. They were able to find the CCTV. The CCTV went out. They immediately got a call from the owner of the car, immediately got two names, immediately connected dots, and they were bringing both Crystal and Brenda in to speak to them. Right away, when Brenda came in, and she was the first to be brought in, it seemed that she was using tactics to try to not necessarily gather sympathy, but like get investigators on her soft side. She immediately noticed that the interrogating officer was wearing a religious bracelet and immediately honed in on that and started to speak about her faith and tried to totally divert the conversation to something that they would have in common. And that is a very specific psychological tactic that she had just used there, which is honestly a little bit terrifying. It's like authorities were able to kind of breeze past that and quickly brought things back onto the topic, which was the murder of Brenda's ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend. Now, all she managed to ask initially was how her name came up in the investigation, which I think is a very thought out question. She wanted to know, in my personal opinion, if Ricky had been the one to say, I think she's responsible. I think she was gauging things out. Granted, I could probably do a whole video on this case just looking into the psychology behind a lot of Brenda Delgado's actions, but I won't do that to you guys here. And ultimately, for 2 hours, they ended up speaking to Brenda, trying to get some sort of idea of like where her mind was, if she could have potentially been involved. And she essentially acted like they were absolutely crazy for questioning her. Brenda Delgado informed officers that she was picked up by Crystal that day. So she's already kind of like confirming the story that Joe Ortiz had said, but she didn't mention him specifically. She continued to state that she had studied at the library and then said that she had gone to dinner at Chili's that night. I don't know if she mentioned Joe at that point, but she was able to pull out a receipt. Like, it was like ready to go, perfectly folded, tucked in a very obvious, easy to access spot in her wallet. And she was just like, yeah, here we go. Here's my Chili's receipt to prove that I was not anywhere near the area where Kendra Hatcher was killed at the time of the murders. On top of her saying, I couldn't have been there, she also entirely played down her relationship with Ricky. Brenda tried to state that her relationship with Ricky was not serious at all, that they did not have all these great intentions of a future and plans. And she also stated that she didn't even know Ricky's girlfriend's name or what she looked like. She basically distanced herself as far as she could from Kendra.
We close out at 8. Actually, we're later. 8:57.
Okay, close out at 8:57. Do you mind if I hang up?
Now, at this point, Detective, are you looking at a receipt from Chili's?
Yes, I am.
What was it about that receipt from Chili's that kind of drew some suspicion from you, if any?
When I was interrogating her, she mentioned the receipt from Chili's. It was kind of quick that she had a receipt. That information came out before anything else. In the moments prior during the interview, she was having a hard time remembering how she got from place to place, where her day started, what time it started, who she got a car from. But she was very confident that she had a receipt in her possession from Chili's, and that stood out to me.
What about the condition of the receipt?
The receipt that she handed to me was very close to being pristine condition. There was very little, if any, creases in this receipt, and it was at the top of her wallet. So that did stick out.
But what she didn't know was that Crystal was in a nearby room at this point, and this woman was telling everything. Initially, Crystal denied having anything to do with this, but she knew that she was trapped by the CCTV footage because the woman that was in the driver's seat of that Jeep looked very much like Crystal Cortez. She ended up telling authorities that this was her driving, but it wasn't at all what it looked like. Crystal Cortez claimed that an unknown armed man jumped into the car with her and her son. And with her son in the backseat, she essentially was forced to do whatever this man said to protect the both of them. And so this man ordered her to go to this apartment complex where Kendra was killed. She said that she drove into the parking garage and the man all of a sudden, just jumped out of the car. She heard gunshots, and then the man jumped back in and yelled at her to leave. But she said she had no idea what they were there for, no idea who this man was, no idea who he may have shot, no idea what the purpose of all of this was, and that was it. But when authorities confronted her, again, with the surveillance footage that they had, saying, look, your son's clearly not in the car, which does not match up to your story at all. You were alone in your car without this man anywhere near you for a period of time. It was an opportunity to escape if you genuinely thought that this man was a danger and you didn't do it. You waited for him. They're like, this is not adding up. The math ain't mathin'. And so she at this point began to change the story up. At this point, Crystal claimed that a man named Lamar had been paid $500 by Brenda Delgado to rob a woman named Kendra Hatcher. And so we already know at this point, Crystal's involved in one way or another. Brenda's involved in one way or another because she just knows information directly related to the crime. She claimed that this Lamar character was just hired by Brenda to rob Kendra, but for one reason or another, unknown to her, he ended up shooting Kendra Hatcher as well. So authorities are like, okay, we're making moves with Crystal. We know someone named Lamar is involved, and we know that Brenda Delgado hired someone to go after Kendra. And so authorities went back to Kendra and they tried, you guys, every technique they possibly could to get her to confess without giving away what they had, without talking about the fact that Crystal had said certain things, but she just wouldn't crack. Like, they took this to the deepest level they possibly could, trying to sympathize with her, being like, I get angry too sometimes, I get jealous too sometimes, but it just wasn't happening. So ultimately, Brenda had to be released. They had no reason to keep her, but Crystal Cortez was arrested on capital murder charges. And so they began to investigate from there. They knew there had to be some connection that they would be able to make. They also wanted to figure out who this Lamar character was. And so they started investigating deeper into Crystal, going through her phone records, and they couldn't find Lamar. They did find a man by the name of Christopher Love. And in the days right before Kendra Hatcher's murder, during the time of Kendra Hatcher's murder, and immediately after, there was a lot of communication between Crystal Cortez and Christopher Love. And so authorities believed that this Lamar character wasn't real, and it was actually Christopher, and Crystal was just essentially trying to protect him. So authorities went to find Christopher Love, and they even were able to match certain details Crystal had given about this Lamar character as actually things that, described Christopher, down to the color car he had and where he lived. When they found him, they searched Christopher's car, and sure enough, they found a Smith & Wesson matching the gun that was used to kill Kendra, at least the type of gun. Obviously, forensic testing had to go further to match everything up exactly, but this was a step in the right direction. And after that, they decided to go through his phone, and they ended up finding a picture taken the day after the murder of him holding $500 in cash, the exact amount that Crystal claimed Brenda offered to pay him if he participated in this crime. So Christopher Love was arrested right alongside Crystal, and he also admitted that this was a big scheme all thrown together by none other than Brenda Delgado. He said that Brenda had told him that she was a part of this infamous Mexican drug cartel, that she would get him all sorts of drugs and money if he helped her out. And so I believe even at this point, he said that the initial plan was never to just rob Kendra, that the full plan was to murder her and basically to make it look like a robbery. And so at this point, authorities are like, this is it, we're ready to go. And they went to go and arrest Brenda Delgado for the part that she played in the murder of Kendra Hatcher. But strongly that they would be able to put together a case to show that she had, conspired to commit murder. She had literally created a murder for hire plot. And so Brenda Delgado was added to the FBI's top 10 most wanted fugitives because she was a wild card. I don't think she had any criminal history. I don't think there was pretty much anything out of the norm. And so to see her absolutely snap like that made authorities concerned. They were like, what else is she going to do to get what she needs? Clearly, she is willing to go all the way in the pursuit of her desires. And so they did not want Brenda running around rampant in the US and Mexico, anywhere, because she could be a potential danger. And this announcement ended up shocking a lot of people, even Ricky initially. The fact that Brenda was being looked into for a murder for hire plot, and the fact that she had literally fled the country, she was on the FBI's top 10 most wanted, none of this felt real to a lot of people. Ricky was like, I never thought she would do anything like this. It was a total shock. And Brenda's family even came forward and also said that there was no way they believed she was involved in this murder scheme. Her family spoke out very frustrated, saying that she was a good religious woman, she was not the jealous type, and they felt like everyone just got this totally wrong and mixed up. Meanwhile, Kendra's family and Ricky are grieving the loss of an amazing woman, partner, daughter, friend, and it was so unexpected and brutal and devastating. And they weren't sure if they would be able to find Brenda. And when you have this woman who clearly has been harboring hatred and anger and jealousy for that long, I would be scared to sleep at night. Even if I knew she was in Mexico, I would be in the US a whole country away, scared to death. And so the FBI started working diligently with Mexican authorities to hopefully be able to find Brenda Delgado. And after 6 months, they finally did. So she managed to lay low for quite some time. It turned out that Brenda had run off to Mexico and been hiding out with her own family. And she purposely lived her life in a way that no one would see her, know her, recognize her. She genuinely thought that this was all just going to blow over and she could just go about her life like she didn't just commit the most heinous crime imaginable. When she was located in Torreon, Mexico in April of 2016, she did surrender. I think she kind of realized, oh crap, the FBI is looking for me. I'm on the top 10 most wanted list. Like, this could end very badly. And so she peacefully went. But my opinion is that she only did that because she knew exactly what she was doing. And when I tell you that I first heard this and wanted to scream at the top of my lungs because I so strongly feel that this was something planned and purposely done. When you are a Mexican citizen, which she had dual citizenship. If you end up in Mexico and are charged with a crime in another country, you cannot be extradited to that other country if prosecution is seeking the death penalty. I don't know if this just worked out in her favor, or if she really did just so thoroughly think this through to save her own self, which makes me want to vomit. But regardless, Mexico was like, we are not going to send her to the US. We're not sending her to you unless you take the death penalty off the table, which was a massive blow because that is exactly what the prosecution had been planning on doing. Crystal, at this point, in the last 6 months, waiting for Brenda to be found, had taken a deal to be the star witness in Christopher's trial, which would hopefully be coming up soon. And whenever they found Brenda, she would also be a star witness in Brenda's trial. And the deal was that she would be getting 35 years with the possibility of parole and 15 if she would speak out against both of these people. And she immediately took it. She had a young child. She was like, I don't know what I was thinking. She wanted the opportunity to get out sooner to be with her child and maybe do something with her life and turn things around. Granted, if she was untruthful at all in her testimony, that deal would be taken away immediately, and I think she at least would have been looking at life in prison. But Christopher, who had actually been the one accused of being the one who shot the gun, and Brenda, who was accused of starting this entire thing, authorities wanted to go for the death penalty for both of them, but they had no choice at this point. It was either try for life in prison with Brenda and be able to extradite her back to the US, or just let her off and let her live her life. And they certainly were not going to be doing that at all. So they agreed, death penalty was off the table, and Brenda Delgado was extradited back to the US. And the reality that unfolded in the courtroom through witness testimonies, I have absolutely no words. It became clear that right after Ricky broke up with Brenda the first time, she started to spiral. Authorities had retrieved all of Brenda's electronics through warrants and also had obviously spoken to numerous people and found that she had been actively stalking Ricky that entire time. Brenda had his passwords for his email account, his iCloud account, anything at all that held his personal information. She had access to it. And she even kept a key to his apartment. And I feel like I heard in the trial that she had used it before to go in there when he wasn't there, but I cannot say that for sure. It wouldn't surprise me. But regardless, this is how she was able to track his every move. She knew when he was texting a new woman to go on a date. She knew that he was on dating apps. She knew where he was going to go with his dates, when they would go there. So it was not just a coincidence that she was showing up at his salsa classes, that she was showing up when he would go running, that she suddenly decided to go to Panera the exact same time Ricky was there on one of his first dates. I can't even begin to imagine what this felt like for Ricky when he realized that all this time she was reading every message he sent. She was reading every single email he sent. She was watching every time he went out with a woman. I mean, literally knew absolutely everything. And all these times where he's seeing her and being cordial and waving and saying hello, she had literally been there stalking him. And despite Ricky purposely not telling Brenda the name of his new girlfriend, Kendra, because in that email, he didn't say what her name was. He was just like, I'm moving on, whatever. She knew exactly how to figure that out on her own because she was looking at all their text messages. So she was able to, from there, make a fake Facebook account and watched their Facebook profiles as well. She saw every picture that they posted, every, vacation that they went on, and essentially she was able to watch as they fell in love. Brenda realized very quickly that there would be no tricking Ricky back into her arms like she had done once before, when she purposely kind of cornered him at this salsa class, hoping she could kind of woo him back into her life. He was moving on with plans of a future with another woman, and she just full on snapped at this point. Things got that much worse when Ricky, just days prior to the murder of Kendra, kicked Brenda off his phone plan. She knew that he was moving away and Kendra was going to follow. She essentially lost all control and all connection to him. And that is when she immediately put this plan that she had been concocting for a long time now into action. After the second time that Ricky had left Brenda, she seemed to start to kind of rope in people in hopes of getting help with this plan that she was putting together. And that was February 2015. So for over 6 months, Brenda had been plotting the execution of Kendra. And this led her to reach out to an old high school friend named Jennifer. And eventually she convinced Jennifer to move in with her. And Jennifer has testified that basically right away, Brenda seemed totally off her rocker. From my understanding, I think they worked at the mall together, and that's kind of how they, got reconnected and decided to move in together. And Jennifer testified that she only lasted about 2 weeks in the apartment before she was running for the hills. According to Jennifer, as soon as she moved in, all Brenda spoke about was Ricky and wanting to get back at him. She made it very clear that she was stalking Ricky, she was stalking his new girlfriend, and while they had known each other for a while, like upon moments essentially of Jennifer moving in, like hadn't even unpacked her boxes, Brenda's like, hey, can I get you to put Ricky in a coma with a baseball bat and then inject a drug-filled syringe into Kendra, all in return for $2,000, a car, and drugs? There at this point was like literally no self-preservation. She just wanted Kendra gone and even wanted to harm Ricky because she was going so wild over everything that was happening. And while this would probably take most people completely back and freak them out, Jennifer has admitted that she had considered it for a minute. She was like using copious amounts of drugs at the time. And so she said she wasn't thinking clearly. All she was hearing was money, car, drugs. And so she was thinking about potentially doing this, and ultimately she came to and was like, what on earth am I agreeing to? And so she dropped it. She was refusing and she started to not come home. She was trying to avoid Brenda at all costs because all Brenda wanted to talk about was her plans to unalive Kendra. And Brenda started going crazy on Jennifer. She was mad that Jennifer wasn't coming home. She wanted Jennifer to be at the apartment. She would call her and ask her where she was. So like this obsessive control over everyone was just spreading like a disease everywhere. Just before Jennifer moved out, she had a friend that came over to the apartment where she lived with Brenda because this friend had a son. They wanted to go to the pool. And this friend was Crystal Cortez. So this was the first time that Brenda had even met Crystal. And right away, it's like she just kind of saw someone who could easily be manipulated. Crystal Cortez was very young. She had a son. She was a single mother. She was barely holding on in regards to money and keeping her life moving forward. And so Brenda very quickly befriended her. Now, ultimately, Jennifer ended up moving out. She has claimed that she went out of town with Crystal at one point, and while she was gone, Brenda had like gone through all of her belongings. And so just, again, very weird situation. So she moved out, but despite the fact that Jennifer moved out, Brenda made sure to maintain contact with Crystal. Now, immediately, as expected, Brenda started to speak to Crystal all about Ricky and how he had done her wrong. I mean, she would sit down and just endlessly show Crystal photos of Ricky and Kendra together, going through all of their social media, pointing out when they said this and when they did this, and, you know, this is when they had this vacation. Brenda had even like screenshot their itineraries for all the trips that they had gone on. Like, she had dozens and dozens and dozens of screenshots on her phone. According to Crystal, they spoke of numerous plans, ranging from injecting Kendra with heroin, to overdose her, injecting her with a large amount of sedatives, like all things that Brenda could easily get her hands on, or Crystal could easily get her hands on. They had even gone to a thrift store to try and buy a gun, but they backed out last minute, worried that it would be too easily traced back to them. They had thought out what car they wanted to use. They already knew they didn't want to use Brenda's Lexus because it would be easily traced back to her. They considered using one of Brenda's cousin's cars. And then they were like, no, that will also come back to us. They literally even like went and test drove a car for sale to try to like under the table buy this car and then get rid of it afterwards. I mean, you guys, they went through every single detail thoroughly. This is what their whole lives and conversations were revolving around at this time. But eventually they were like, okay, we're going to get someone else's car, and we also need to get someone else involved, because they were like, we don't know if we can do this on our own. And so they ended up going to Crystal's neighborhood, which was apparently a questionable neighborhood with lots of criminal activity. And they recruited 34-year-old Christopher Love to help them. Christopher had a gun. He was more than happy to do the job in return for drugs and money, which Brenda offered him. And because Brenda told him she was a part of this, cartel, it helped convince him to do the job. He thought like this was a legit thing that he was going to get to do. And so they ended up following Kendra at this point all over town to see where she worked, what her typical hours were. And ultimately they decided to commit this horrible act in the parking garage at her apartment. There would be less witnesses. It was smaller, quieter. And so they watched as she would enter the garage. They, tried to see where she would normally park. They had her car memorized, and they'd even gone into the garage themselves to scope things out. They had even gone to Kendra's car parked there and found out that her back passenger side door didn't lock. And so they were considering coming back and putting a tracker on her car. You guys, the whole 9 yards, the level of thought that they put into this. When it came to the car they were going to use in the crime, they ultimately settled on using a BMW from a friend of Brenda's named Robert. Brenda had reached out to her friend Robert to ask if he would work on her Lexus, and they arranged that he would come pick up her Lexus, she would temporarily take his BMW, and then they would just swap things back. And to make sure that you're not confused, because I know it seems like we've already spoken about this before, it's because we have, but it was with a completely different person, and this will all make sense in just a minute. I know there's lots of names and lots of moving parts. So that is exactly what happened. Robert came, picked up this Lexus, Brenda took his BMW, and once they started kind of driving it, Brenda, Crystal, and Christopher realized that this BMW had, I think, some starter issues or something with the acceleration. But regardless, it was something that made them worried that they would not be able to, it would potentially impact their getaway, basically. And so they're like, we don't feel comfortable using this car. We got to figure out something else. And so at this point, Brenda reached out to Joe Ortiz saying, hey, will you work on my friend's BMW and we'll trade it for your Jeep? And so that's how all that kind of happened. So that wasn't even their initial plan. So on the morning of the 2nd, the day before Brenda knew Kendra would be heading off on a dream vacation with Ricky, they literally planned it this way to totally just throw a wrench into everybody's lives. Right before that, the plan started rolling. Crystal and Brenda went to get the Jeep. They traded Robert's BMW for it, and then they drove to pick up Christopher. Christopher and Crystal then dropped Brenda off at the library because she needed to have this alibi. They went and sat outside of Kendra's work, the two of them. But after hours and hours, Kendra still hadn't left. And so they ended up switching plans up a little bit. I guess Crystal dropped Christopher off back at home, went and had to pick her son up from school. She grabbed him food from Sonic like it was just your average day, and they weren't in the middle of acting out a murder plot. And she dropped her son off at his grandparents to return to the plan. And so they were back on schedule after the little hiccup, and she picked up Christopher. They went back to Kendra's place of work, and she finally got off, as we know, at around 6:45 p.m. But they ended up losing her in traffic, and so they just headed straight to her apartment anyways to try and get in the parking garage to essentially be there waiting for her to arrive. They snuck into the parking garage by closely following another car because they did not have a code to get in the gate, and it just makes me so mad that there was just so many security measures and somehow they just all did not work the way that they should. But regardless, while waiting for Kendra to show up, Christopher put on gloves. He fully cleaned the gun. He fully cleaned the bullet. Basically anything that could be left behind and was involved in the crime, he took care of so it could not be traced back to him. And when Kendra pulled in, they immediately jumped into action. Christopher jumped from the car, and as Kendra got out, he shot her in the back of the head. And as he was instructed by Brenda, he took Kendra's purse to make it look like a robbery. He then jumped into the back seat of the Jeep, ducked down so he wouldn't be seen, and Crystal sped off. Now, she admitted during the trial that she had no idea that going down the parking garage, there was no exit. So she corroborated the story of the man that called 911, saying that they had to turn around and go back up. They then drove to a nearby town to dispose of Kendra's purse and other belongings because they did not actually want them. They just wanted to set things up. For one reason or another, they freaked out. They didn't dump those things and instead just came back to Dallas and waited on a phone call from Brenda to move to the next steps. Now, this is when Brenda used Joe's phone to call Crystal. So I don't believe she ever actually tried to reach out to Crystal from her phone because she didn't want there to be that communication there. Again, she was not wanting to connect herself with this at all. And so she used Joe's phone to reach out, and then they made the plan to switch the Jeep and BMW at Joe's house. Now, at this point, keep in mind, poor Robert is now off somewhere. He's been waiting since 7:30 because initially his car was supposed to be used in the crime that he didn't know about. And he had an agreement with Brenda that they'd meet at 7:30 to have dinner and switch cars. And she's just nowhere to be found. She can't be reached. And so it wasn't until 9:30 or sometime after that they finally were able to switch back cars with Robert as well. And they believe that they had just created this confusing, crazy web that no one would be able to figure out. And so from there, they went to Crystal's grandmother's house and burned Kendra's belongings. It makes me sick because it would have been at around this time that Ricky had reached out to Brenda saying, oh my gosh, my girlfriend was just murdered. And she probably didn't respond because she was too busy burning all of Kendra's things. Now, the following day, Brenda gave Christopher the cash and the drugs as promised, so she did go through with payment and he was able to confirm that. She also paid Crystal $500 for her participation. And then Brenda told Crystal that she was going to flee to Mexico. So this is something that Crystal had already known about. When things started unfolding and Joe confronted Brenda about the Jeep being used in the crime, she just threw Crystal under the bus saying, nope, Crystal was doing a drug deal, and then fled the country.
She wanted to get rid of Kendra Hatcher because she was envious of her.
Prosecutors showed the jury binoculars that Cortez testified she and Delgado used to spy on Hatcher across the street from her dental office in the days before the 2015 murder. Cortez admitted from the witness stand that she was behind the wheel of the getaway car when hitman Christopher Love shot and killed Hatcher after the victim arrived inside the parking garage of her uptown apartment.
Is that the Jeep you were driving that day?
Yes.
Is that you in that driver's seat?
Yes.
Now, acquaintances of Brenda's started to come out of the woodworks at this point, saying that something had been so off about her relationship with Ricky, that she was just utterly obsessed with him from the get-go. It was an unhealthy level of infatuation that very obviously clouded her judgment in the worst possible way. And so all of these awful actions and all of this terrible, painful loss all boiled down to jealousy. And honestly, it just sucks because I feel like, you look at the lives of all of these individuals, they all had gone through a lot. They had all pushed very far. They were all, fairly successful. And to see that Brenda was just so willing to throw all of that away in order to end the life of someone, like quite literally murder someone, and she was willing to end her life because of a man, is just, after all that she had going for her, it's just something that will never, ever, ever make sense in my mind. Now, ultimately, Christopher was found guilty in his trial. He was the first to go to trial after 2 hours of deliberation, and he was sentenced to death. And when it came to Brenda Delgado, it only took jurors 20 minutes to find her guilty. She was found guilty of capital murder, and she was sentenced to life in prison with no parole.
Brenda Delgado, the mastermind in the murder for hire plot targeting a Dallas dentist, today convicted of capital murder. Delgado hired a hitman to kill her ex-boyfriend's new love interest, Dr. Kendra Hatcher, in an uptown parking garage. Robbie Owens live at the Crowley Courthouse. Horrible chapter, clearly, that is finally over for a grieving family, Robbie.
Yes, indeed, Doug. And this is the second trial that the Hatcher family has had to endure. The hitman, Christopher Love, is already on death row. The question today, would jurors hold the woman responsible who put the whole awful plan into place? And that answer came with lightning speed.
Stole from me, she stole from all of us. Find her guilty, because she is guilty.
And jurors took less than 20 minutes to oblige. Prosecutors today somewhat surprised, but extremely pleased.
We're just glad the right thing happened.
Brenda Delgado, convicted of capital murder, although she never fired a shot. Prosecutors convinced jurors that she hired a hitman to kill her ex-boyfriend's new love interest, dentist Kendra Hatcher, for $500 and drugs.
Jury's spoken. Obviously, we respect the decision of any jury, and we'll do what we need to do now going forward.
But first,
you can't even look at me.
Delgado refused to lift her eyes, but was forced to listen as Dr. Hatcher's sister confronted her from the witness stand.
No matter how envious you were of any human being, it does not give you the right to destroy lives, many lives, your own family's lives, our lives, Kendra's lives, my children's lives. Who the hell do you think you are, Brenda?
And then from Hatcher's mother.
You, Brenda Delgado, have earned your spot on this earth behind cold steel bars for the rest of your miserable, pathetic life.
Brenda Delgado already sentenced to life in prison, no possibility of parole. Her defense attorneys, though, do plan to appeal. Live at the Crowley Courthouse in Dallas.
Now, Brenda is currently serving at William P. Hobby Unit in Marlin, Texas, and Christopher Love is sitting on death row at Allen B. Polensky and West Livingston, Texas. And from my understanding, there's no date scheduled for him yet. It's honestly not too surprising. All of the trials and things started in 2018, so it usually takes years. During the trial, Brenda offered absolutely no words to Kendra's family. There was no apology. There was no, I should never have done this. I don't know what I was thinking. She offered up absolutely nothing. She also didn't apologize to all of the people that she manipulated and roped in. Granted, they all fully make their own decisions and know right from wrong, but her manipulation definitely did not help in the situation, and she didn't apologize to them. She didn't apologize to both Robert and Joe, who, in my opinion, were incredibly lucky that authorities investigated so well, and because I feel like this could have easily turned into a situation where somehow they ended up with charges of some kind, and she just didn't care. Brenda was ready to burn everybody and everything due to her jealousy. She would not look at anyone in the courtroom. She would not look at the jury. The only person she looked at the whole time was just staring straight at the judge. And the only moment where there was like some sort of change in her demeanor and a quick glance was when Ricky was on the stand and he was asked to point out Brenda and like describe what she was wearing to just confirm that's who they were speaking at. And for a split moment, she briefly glances over at him. And it was honestly super hard to watch in all of the videos of the trial. You can almost physically like feel how upset Ricky was and how uncomfortable he was having to look at Brenda and point to her, knowing what she had done, not just Kendra, but to him and to every single person that loved Kendra and was a part of her life. And I honestly think that the only reason Brenda even looked at him to begin with, after refusing to look at everyone else, was because she, I think, has this delusion that he might feel bad for her. Like she was hoping he might flash her a smile or a look of sympathy or something. And it's just like the level of delusion you have to be in to believe that there is anything left after what has happened is just beyond me. And I could totally be wrong as to that being the reason why she looked at him, but just, you could almost like feel it. It was a tangible thing. So Brenda will not be getting out. There's no possibility for parole. I have not seen much in regards to any sort of appeal when it comes to her. But in 2022, I do know that Christopher Love tried to appeal, claiming that there was racial bias within the jury. But ultimately, this motion was denied. However, given the fact that he is on death row, I am sure there will be many, many, many more appeals to come for him. But I just don't personally believe any of them will be very successful because this is just an absolutely asinine crime. I can guarantee you that anyone that cared about Kendra, anyone that even only briefly knew Kendra, is going to show up to fight and ensure that all of these people stay in prison for as long as humanly possible. Kendra's good friend Tammy did come forward after the trial saying, quote, "I don't do a lot of smiling anymore. I've isolated myself from a lot of my friends. It has affected my marriage, my ability as a mother. It is affecting everything. And I am not the only one. This is a butterfly effect. Kendra's murder has affected thousands of people." This was just such an unnecessary loss of life. And I feel like is just one of those times where you lose any and all faith in humanity at the fact that so many people are willing to sit down and, you know, openly discuss the murder of someone. I think it's even scarier that Brenda had shown no signs before this of, you know, being capable of something like this. Like even Ricky was like, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense that she would be able to do this at first. And then she turned around and managed to, within a heartbeat, land herself on the FBI's top 10 most wanted fugitive list because of what she did. Hoping that there will be no appeals at all when it comes to Brenda Delgado. I am going to be literally watching this like a hawk because there's a new chapter that is now started for Kendra's family, and everyone that was involved now is the process that not a lot of people talk about, where all of the media reporting and support and different things from the public stops. And in my opinion, it's one of the harder parts of dealing with the aftermaths of being a victim of true crime, and that's having to go through the appeals process. I mean, all these times that Christopher Love is going to appeal, Kendra's family is likely going to need to come and recant all the reasons why this man who murdered their daughter should not be able to walk free. Everyone who's been involved, people that have been involved, will not be able to escape from this until the moment his date is set and there is no longer any question. They then have to sit and worry about the date that Crystal Cortez is going to get out, and they're going to have to worry about if Brenda is going to try for parole. So my heart absolutely aches for everybody involved and the lifelong journey that Brenda Delgado has forcibly put them on. And this is why victims advocacy is so important, and all of these different resources that assist families even after there has been a trial, even after things seem to be all said and done, because the honest truth and reality about it is that this will never go away for them. That is all that I have for you guys today. I just want everyone to remember Kendra the way that everyone that knew her does, how special and important she was to everyone. And I want to say a huge thank you to you guys for taking the time to hear about Kendra and listen to her story. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below to become a part of the Howland fam so that we can hopefully bring them home together or bring them justice together. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.